FTW Devlog time. It's been quite a while. Woo. If you want to see what's going on with Takeover, of Snakes and Bones Takeover, read the community post. As you can see, the title screen here has been altered significantly. Woo. Now I'm going to show the new version of the intro because it is slightly different now. You've seen it prior, but it has been heavily altered. As you can see, Dimitri has gotten a significant redesign since that first video that showcased him, which was about a year ago at this point. And you still have the force lose battle against Barkspark here, so I'm going to go ahead and let that play out. Alright, now that that's happened, I'm going to go ahead and show off some of the new content. So, firstly, the hub area has been altered slightly. There is now a town hall building. To access it, you need to go up until the room next to where you fought Raid Cruncher, which would be here. We'll talk about Chup later, don't worry about him. But yeah, once you have that key, you can go back to the town hall, which will now be opened up. This is entirely optional, by the way, and you will have a boss fight against an NPC named Mr. Dignified, who is incredibly easy because he's scaled for early game. He can be, at earliest, your 4th boss. I'm obviously using, well, no, you can get the saw blade launcher and the chain gun before you fight Mr. Dignified, so, in fact, you have to. You have to get the saw blade launcher, at least. Technically, you don't have to, get the, chain gun, as you can walk around it to get to the, place that is the key. Once you beat him, he drops this item, which is a permanent upgrade for the Fleshhound King head that buffs its damage. I've nerfed the base damage of the Fleshhound King head by 25% of what it used to be, while the upgraded form is 25% more than what it used to be. So that means if you average them out, it's the same as it was before. But anyway, the point is, Fleshhound King head with that actually becomes useful. So yeah. And now I gotta show this because I think this is funny. I have yet to show this part. I've shown part of this, but so if you go to the end of the sewer, there is a new room here with an arrow pointing away from it. And if you go to the end of the graveyard, there is a room here with an arrow pointing out of it. There is now a route that connects the end of the graveyard to the end of the sewer, which effectively makes both Gravedigger and Natto technically optional bosses. You have to fight one of them to get to this route, but you don't have to fight both of them. Which means Natto, Gravedigger, and the boss on this route we're about to take are all pseudo-optional bosses. Which is neat, I guess. That enemy is called the Totahag. It's a very, very simple enemy. But it exists so that this route has an exclusive enemy. As you can see, there's a boss ahead thing, but there's no checkpoint bed before it. There's also not a checkpoint bed for it on the other side of this route, making this one of the only bosses where you actually have to conserve your resources before you get to it. As if you waste all of your ammo on the enemies before Lament, you're going to have a rough time here. Now, Lament's actually a very easy boss moveset-wise. He only has 2 moves. Shooting a projectile downwards that bounces up, or shooting a projectile diagonally that bounces up. So overall, he's a very, very simple encounter. It's just that your resources are incredibly depleted by the time you get to him. Meaning there's not really a reason to take this route other than 100% completion, since he has a book entry. A journal entry. Anyway, in Phase 2, he starts actually following the player, but his attacks are basically the same, just, more dangerous. Oh yeah, I've modified the way grenades work, so they do that now. So that's neat. They're significantly more useful now, since they're actually AoEs. You don't get a reward for beating Lament, though, and then the route continues. This here is Hellard. Hellard is effectively the graveyard route equivalent of the Totahag. He's very simple. He has significantly more health than Totahag, but he doesn't really do anything special. I'm not going to go through the rest of that route, but it does indeed connect to the room before Lotus. There's not really a reason to go through that route, since going through and beating Natto and doing the whole sewer, and going through and beating Gravedigger and then the rest of the graveyard is significantly easier than going through the entirety of Lament's route with your limited resources. So, there's not much of a reason to do it, but it's neat that it exists. Alright, now I guess we gotta talk about Chup. Chup is an optional boss that spawns randomly in any room of an area, aside from ones that have beds, NPCs, or ones that are too narrow to fight him in. Chup will spawn in any room of an area randomly if you have beaten that area's key boss, which in the case of the prison would be Gutter, in the desert Raid Cruncher, in the sewer King, and in the graveyard Lotus. The only area that he cannot spawn in are weird optional things. He can spawn in the Lament route, by the way, but he cannot spawn in an optional thing we're going to go over later in this video, and he also cannot spawn in the new Flesh Labs at all. So yeah, since the new, we'll talk about why that is later. But Chup, effectively the way it works is he has no attacks, but as you damage him, he becomes passively more powerful, so he'll speed up, he'll start creating a trail behind him passively, he'll start creating projectiles passively, etc. He has no actual attack animations, it's purely just becoming more dangerous passively, and again, you get no reward for beating him. But the unique thing about Chup is that he is other than the whole spawning in whatever room you want thing, is that he will infinitely respawn. Just gotta, hit that. There we go. So yeah, Chup is most interesting because he exists, not because he's actually mechanically interesting. It's just the fact that he exists and the circumstances behind his existence. Alright, now we're going to talk about another weird optional boss, and an entire side quest. After beating Gutter and talking to the NPC in the following room, you will learn about a weapon known as the X weapon. It is mapped to the 0 key. And he tells you that whenever you're supposed to use the X key to hunt out specific characters. The first one being Punk Green, which you'll find in the prison area here. I am fairly certain I have already shown off Punk Green. I don't think I've shown off the other 4. They're all effectively the exact same. They're just Eshes with buffed health, effectively. They're very simple. They were originally each going to have one unique move on top of shooting, but then I decided not to do that because, number 1, I am a lazy person, and number 2, what would be the point? They're dead. They're dead in like 20 seconds each, so it wouldn't really matter. Plus, some of them had really annoying gimmicks. Anyway, the next one spawns in the desert, and it is Punk White. Oh, we got a Chup spawn in here. I think it's like 1 in 20? Something like that. He has a relatively high chance of spawning, but a new player is relatively unlikely to encounter him, as you can only encounter him if you're backtracking through an area you've already beaten. Anyway, the X weapon will start glowing with a blue hue if there's a punk in the room, which there is here. And it has to be in an area where there's no fog. If there's fog and the punk is supposed to spawn there, it will not glow. So, A player is not supposed to figure this out. It's just random secret stuff. That's kind of what a lot of the optional content in FTW is, and FTW in general is just kind of weird optional stuff. The next one is Punk Blue, which spawns very close by to a bed here in this area. Anyway, killing a punk will increase the speed that the X weapon moves and increase the damage that it does. But you always only have one use of the X weapon until refilling at a bed. So, And the final punk will be in the graveyard area. I believe it'd be faster to go from the gravedigger bed. I think I forgot to mention this, but Froth has a slightly smaller hitbox now, vertically. Horizontally, it's basically the same, but vertically, Froth has a slightly smaller hitbox. It now excludes his head, so his body is the only part of him that can get hit now. Effectively, Hollow Waste 2 rules. I've also changed some of the enemy projectiles to just be more visually clear, so that it's easier to avoid them. And this is the final one, which is Punk Red, which I know he's predominantly yellow, but whatever. Yeah, there would be literally no point in giving them exclusive moves. But once you kill all 4 of them, return to the room in which you get the X weapon. And a door will be unlocked over here, which takes you into the Hollow Wasteland, in which you can fight the Ozzicult boss. Ozzicult does not work at all in any way similarly to how we did in Knights. He's completely different. Effectively, what you want to do is kill each one of the 4 punks, which are stationary this time, and killing one will decrease Ozzicult's health and cause him to move faster. Ozzicult cannot take damage from any of your weapons. It's a gimmick boss, effectively, but it's fun. And once you do this, the X weapon will be at its maximum strength. Once he gets down to his last bit of health, you effectively just want to spam grenades the last one to death, since like 4 or 5 of them will kill him. And once you do that, the X weapon becomes as powerful as it's going to be, dealing, I think, 50 damage. And once you exit this room down here, the door behind you seals and you can't go back in, which is fine, considering there's nothing over there. And we got another Chup spawn. Alright. That's where the way Game Maker does randomization. It has to be weighted in some way. There's no way. It has to be weighted in some way. Because it feels like we're getting Chup way more than we should. But anyway, and it feels like that every time a randomization feature is in anything Game Maker related. But anyway, so what else do I want to show? I guess the final area of the game we'll have to do. So, once you beat all 4 key bosses, go to this room over here, and you will have a rematch with Fink, which is substantially harder than the first time around. He only has one new move. The other moves are just buffed versions of what he had in the first encounter, and the new move is the summon move that he had from Hallow Waste 1, effectively just making this Hallow Waste 1 Fink, but in FTW, with FTW styled mechanics. Which is fine. That's fine. I do think it's substantially better than the Hallow Waste 1 incarnation, just because it's far fairer. That version got ridiculous with the Raider spawns, and you didn't really, and since it was Hallow Waste 1 and you didn't have any other ways of dealing with enemies, it made the fight incredibly difficult. Now, this version of Fink does drop the shotgun, but I already have it in my inventory, so yeah. And this version of Fink does not have a journal entry. Just the base version of Fink is the only one that does. Once you beat him, you can now access the final area, the new Flesh Lab. Now, the gimmick with the new Flesh Lab is that you cannot backtrack to a previous room. You can press down all you want, but you can't. So, effectively, you have to keep going until you make it to a bed. Which is fine, because most players aren't going to do that anyway. And this area also has incredibly narrow hallways. So yeah, that's the main reason Chup doesn't spawn here. Incredibly narrow hallways, and the player doesn't have the opportunity to backtrack to a previous room if Chup spawns in the room you're in. So yeah. Now the Hellard and Totahag do not spawn in this area at all. It's just the normal enemies. You're going to want to use the Saw Blade Launcher on the Gags. That's the best weapon to deal with them. Axe for the Clankers. The hammer would have worked better, but the axe has longer range. You don't want to waste your grenades on Clankers. I'm already out of that. This is a substantially harder section than most of the, the rest of the game. It's harder than any other mandatory section in the game, probably. Just because of how long it is, and you have to conserve your ammo to get through it. And the Geg are incredibly dangerous, and there's not a small amount of them here. But yeah, the way the grenade works now makes this substantially easier than it used to be. Hold on, I have the shotgun, I'm stupid. I still have full ammo for the shotgun. Anyway, then we go up here, and a mini-boss named Fritgul Spid is supposed to spawn here. He doesn't right now. You can see him on the map screen, though. There he is. So, yeah. Anyway, once you reach this bed, the joke with Fritgul Spid, though, is that he's the easiest mini-boss in the entire game, because all he does is walk towards you, and he has no attacks whatsoever. That's it. That's the joke. After the hardest section in the game, you get the easiest mini-boss. But here we have Bark Spark, who is like 90% finished. He has all of his moves. He is mechanically identical to the one in the intro, except, you know, he has a health bar. You can kill the one in the intro, technically, but this one actually has a health bar, so you know how you're doing. And obviously, since you have actual weapons this time around, you're more likely to win. Well, we just encountered a glitch that has literally never happened, and I've done this fight dozens of times. I'm leaving it in the video because it's funny. Yeah, Barkspark does not have a death animation or boss icons. Once you beat Barkspark, you get this room that has, you know, dialogue from all of the friendly NPCs. And then you move on to the final boss room, which is the bout against Dimitri. There's going to be a cutscene before Dimitri, but there will not be a boss splash screen, health bar, or icons. Now, Dimitri has the most health of any boss in the entire game. Probably entire series. And you will run out of all of your ammo before he's dead. But the game will infinitely give you ammo drops while fighting him. So effectively, it's a fight where you don't have to worry about ammo conservation at all. You just spam everything. I missed the X, and the X is the only weapon that doesn't have ammo drops during this fight. For whatever reason, it's just giving me Fleshhound King heads. That's fun. Alright. Guess I'm using this. Finally. Something else. I already have max axe weapon, axe ammo, though. Dimitri only has 3 attacks. He, of course, has the spin, he's got the grenade toss, and he's got the shooting from his shoulder thing. It's a very easy fight, but that's the entire point. Is to be easier than Barkspark. It's the weird encounter where you just can spam him with all of your powerful garbage, because the game is giving you ammo for it. Anyway, then he enters the desperation phase, where he just sporadically starts teleporting and spamming explosions, and once he's done with that, you can do this. There we are. Game over, I guess. Woo. I'll probably add a ending cutscene after this that shows all of the characters doing stuff, probably, but this is where FTW ends for now. If it wasn't for one goofy thing in the graveyard area. So, over here, I'm going to go ahead and show this off because I think it's hilarious. Even though it's very unfinished, I think it's neat. So, over in this part of the graveyard, there is a crate with a grenade logo on it, which means, obviously, you gotta grenade it. There we go. And up here, you will find a ladder. Moving up the ladder, and you will enter the Highlands. It is currently an area with no enemies, but it exists. It exists. So yeah, the Highlands. This is currently what I'm working on. For FTW, I've got most of the mandatory content done, other than some weird, mild cosmetic stuff. But yeah, and then going up here just takes you to this screen here, so there's not really a continuation there. But that is where the boss fight would happen for the area, and then the boss fight after that. There'd be more sections, it'd drop a key, you'd use the key here, and then another boss fight. So 2 boss fights in this area, maybe a new weapon, we'll see. I don't know really what the Highlands are going to be, but I just know that they're a weird optional area in FTW. And FTW is in its weird optional content phase right now. Woo.